Hello and welcome to Newsnight, where we talk to major players in Nigeria's journey to growth and economic development. I'm Ladi Akeredoluwale. Thanks for joining us. Nigeria's economic climate is seriously challenged by a number of factors, which my guest today on the program believes have been exacerbated by the arrival of elections and the campaign season. From interest to inflation and unemployment rates, as well as security challenges, my guest believes that a laser focus must now be employed by both outgoing and incoming governments at various levels if Nigeria is to turn the tables around. Newsnight talks to the president of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Dr. Michael Olawale Cole. Dr. Olawale Cole, thank you for your time. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. My pleasure being here.
You became president of the LCCI in December of last year. That's 2021. What's been the experience like, especially with such, shall we say, inclement economic weather that you've had to contend with?
Well, I came in here, like you've said, in December last year. It's been quite a tough time. That what I know is that I feel a bit happier because prior to this time it was COVID, and that limited what the chamber could do in terms of intervention and programming of all our events. But this time around, we are able to move around, we're able to get a lot of things done, we're able to travel, we're able to see people in government and those not in government to see how we can make things a lot better for the economy. So it's not a very kind climate dealing with governance at a time like this, at this level, that we have a job to do, and we must continue to do it.
You referenced it in your answer to the question there when you talked about the weather. And this time you're talking about the economic weather. Many people have already described it as fairly inclement. It's tough. And it's been made even worse, first by COVID, which you also talked about, and then now by other disruptions, some of which we have no control over. For example, what's going on in Ukraine, which has created a spiral-on effect in various sectors. But if we bring it back home here, what's your view today about the general business environment? Where do we stand with that?
Well, with the way the country has been in recent time, at the Chamber of Commerce, we have the opinion that it could be a lot better if certain things are put in place. We know, of course, that government is faced with a lot of challenges, a number of which are due to factors not within their control. But there are a lot of factors within their control that we feel that the country leadership should look at very seriously. If you look at the issue of inflation, if you look at the issue of oil subsidy, if you look at the issue of unemployment, if you look at the issue of insecurity, if you look at the issue of forest management, these are things that are up to a point within the competence of government to handle. But one way or the other, there's been a bit of lack of the political will or the courage to do something that ought to have been done. If this were done much earlier, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Yes, speaking of today, there are certain things that make people, or that I want to assume that make people like you, who are in business, who are in the private sector, worried, especially when you relate it to government. You've already mentioned some of them. The inflation rate seems to have spiked, and even though some of the things that would probably have been responsible for it are within our control, others are not. Do you think, first of all, we are recognizing that that in itself is a problem? And secondly, that they are even doing anything about it? And when I say they, I'm talking about those in charge of policy, which could positively affect us.
Well, it's very clear that there is a divide or not the meeting of places or meeting of minds in the areas of those who are managing our fiscal policies and also our monetary policies. We have been talking about this at the chamber for a long time. There's a need for government departments in charge of fiscal and monetary policies to work in cohesion so as to come up with a front that will address the issues, as against one, taking actions or steps that will get us to +2, and the other one will take action that will get us to -1. So in the long run, we are not where we want to be. For instance, in the area of inflation, a lot of things ought to have been done, which we have been talking about regularly, and which, one way or the other, the will is not there to do it. And if it's been done, I'm sure today we'll be aware. We've also spoken a lot about the issue of insecurity. We've released statements severally on debt burden of the nation. These are things putting us into very, very tough situations. And these are within government to manage. You're not compelled to borrow, but if you don't manage your own resources very well, you might end up doing nothing but to borrow. That's the easiest way to get it down. Just borrow, take more money. Those days they will go and print. But you don't print that easily these days. You just go and borrow money. You go and borrow money, all you're doing, you are putting the pressure on future administrations, putting the pressure on future Nigerians who may not even be part of this borrowing now. They are young, they are in school, but how we are paying, they are the people then in management of our economy or of our businesses.
We are told that we need to borrow. And incidentally, we are told that we need to borrow because of chambers like yourselves and other people in the private sector, because a lot of what people like you require is in infrastructure, better roads, better schools, water, energy supply, power, and all of that. So that if we're borrowing for those, and we are putting those in place, then of course, definitely that is good borrowing, if you pardon my use of the word of that term. But it does appear from your reaction and from the reaction of others in the sector that I've spoken to, that they are not so sure that a lot of that borrowing has been used for that purpose, because they are not seeing that reflect on their output and on their own outcomes. Is that a fair point?
Well, just like the individual, if you have to borrow to do something that will take you to a higher level, why not? If you borrow and does not show on you in the long run, then what have you done with the money? If you look at all the borrowings that have happened in the past and it's still happening now, then the quantum of what is on ground in infrastructure development is what people are talking about. If you borrow $20 billion or naira to do a particular project, the project is going to cost you, like, say, 15 billion, and yet you don't finish what it took 20 billion to do for a 15 billion project, then there's a question somewhere: what's happened to the gap? Where did the money actually go? So a lot of other things go into it. And that's why the issue of corruption in governance is an issue that we need to manage very well in this country. That's the fear of people. If you are borrowing, yes, you have to borrow, you must borrow. America, they borrow a lot. But it's showing in what they are providing infrastructure for the economy to keep being the greatest ever in the world and being a strong economy for over the decades. But for us here, a lot of leakages that are in our revenue generation, we are not addressing them.
Like,
so,
please
like
give me
for
some
instance,
examples.
if you look at the amount of money that is even in the corruption process of even the tax management. A lot of people complain that when they come to them, a lot of people are after what can they get.
You're talking of even the tax.
That's
people,
right,
yeah.
which is the IGR for government. Even for states, a lot of things are happening under. That should not happen. If those things do happen, it will diminish what government will have access to in the long run. Like say, for example, company A is due to pay 2 million naira, just for the case of this argument. And one way or the other, they end up paying 1 million. And somebody has gotten half a million or 70,000 into his or her pocket. These are the things that happen in government. I was Lagos State Finance Commissioner for Finance about 30 years ago, and I knew what we met when we go to government in Ikeja. And we had to put in place a lot of things to encourage tax people, our Inner Revenue Department. A lot of pressure was put on them. We have to also motivate them by giving them infrastructure, vehicles, allowances to make sure they move around and make sure they are discouraged, from taking what should come to government into their own pockets, because they are going to be assessed on how much they have brought in the year. So that's how we moved the Lagos State IGR in 1992 to the figure about 4 times what it was when we came in. And that is what Lagos State has built on now over the years. And now they are making billions every month. But there's a foundation that was laid. That foundation is also available for the federal. It's just for people to ensure that there's probity and accountability in what we do. And unluckily, it's not only in the area of taxation, it's in many other areas of governance that government will need to address. And good enough, Mr. President, a lot of people had confidence that corruption would be an issue that is going to fight to a stop. But we are foreseeing that one thing is the will, but also you would need the cooperation of the citizens of Nigeria to make this happen, because it can be everywhere. But a lot of people are doing, how many will he handle as Mr. President? A lot of people are doing things under that is not in the best interest of the nation. Look at the issue of our oil subsidy. What's happening there? Why are we subsidizing? That's because we are importing mostly what we need. If refineries are working, for which billions are being spent every year for maintenance, what do we have to show for that maintenance over the years? If you look at the budget for the last 5 years on the refineries and maintenance, then you ask the question, what is the output of those refineries in the last 5 years? Compare with what have been spent on it. You ask the question, you just say that it is infinitesimal. So we are now forced to export our crude and bring them in at figures beyond our control.
Yes, because those are international prices.
International prices. And what happened? A number of this oil that's even refined and brought in here is being sold even outside Nigeria. So we are subsidizing not only for Nigerians, but also for people who are outside this country, which to me is not our business. Especially when we are under pressure like this. If we are very buoyant, you can help your neighbors. But you can only help your neighbors when you are comfortable. If you help your neighbors while you are struggling, while you are suffering, you might end up dying. And you now save your neighbor and you are dead. So I will expect that if they want to help our neighbors, it's a good idea, but not at the expense of Nigerians. So a lot of letters leave Nigeria borders, and that is part of the subsidy that we are paying. And if we are not getting refinery to work, we're also importing, and this what we are importing is not used by Nigerians. That you are saying you are subsidizing, they are to make them more comfortable. What of those who are not Nigerians? How do you account for that subsidy? And that's part of the subsidy. In fact, it could be a major part of the subsidy, because a lot of things are going out of the country, which government is aware of. Also, even look at the issue of our oil theft. These are things that I say that if you borrow because you have no source of your own, nobody will blame for you. But if you borrow without blocking your own leakages, as a man, you go to the bank and keep borrowing all the time, you'll be in trouble. But if you know you are spending in areas you have no business spending, you curtail it. If you know your money is missing, one way or the other, through some customers, through some business associates, you try and block it. After you've done all that, you now know, well, I'm now at a point of comfort where I can say, most of my revenue that belong to me, I'm getting them. You can always want to borrow, you can then borrow. But if you are borrowing, when a lot of money is still available for you to tap into, and you don't tap into it, then that borrowing to me is not quite expedient. Look at the oil theft again. People are aware that there must be a high level of conspiracy for it to happen.
Yeah, because for you to be able to extract oil, even if it's at the level of refined products from either the pipelines or from the state, you have to have some level of technological know-how.
And some security. Because these are not taken away only by a car, only by lorries. They also go away by ship, by vessels that go on the waters. And there are people who are managing these waters in terms of control of security. Then people are asking questions, what happened? Where are the eyes of these people when those vessels were sailing out of the country? And
which brings us back to the argument about corruption. But then the basic argument about subsidy I wanted to ask you about, which is that there's supposed to be a spiral effect of this subsidy, which is why so many people say, no, we shouldn't just throw away the subsidy. I'll give you an example, especially, again, given our own situation. If you look at the way diesel prices have moved, in this year alone, in 2022, depending on where you buy diesel now, you may be paying between 800, 850, 900 per liter. Now, most industries, because we have power gaps, are reliant on generators. And most of these bigger generators use diesel. So there's additional cost. Aviation fuel, everybody knows that. The movement of cargo and passengers across Nigeria has more than spiked by several multiples of percentage. Yeah. So when people say, oh, look, these are some of the reasons why we try to control the pricing so that you don't introduce shocks in terms of pricing to the business environment, which they are not able to cope with. Is it a valid argument as someone who is in business? Are you able to say, no, if we know how much? Because I've spoken to one or two people who say, no, that's not an argument for subsidy. If we know how much it is, we can build it into our cost, provided it is stable at that price. We can build it into our cost and we can know whether whatever it is we are doing is viable or not. So again, there are these two sides of it. So which one is it that is really the correct one?
Well, for us at the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we've made a point over time that we ought to have resolved the issue of subsidy long ago, not even now. Because if we had, we'll have adjusted into it by now. And government will have been able to free a lot of money for infrastructure to help the economy to thrive. When you talk of subsidy, there's nothing wrong with subsidy as a matter of principle. A lot of countries do it. I will recollect in the last couple of months in the UK, look, governments subsidize people for their energy that they use at home because they discovered that prices have just gone up beyond imagination. And they knew that would be a lot of pressure on householders. And what they did was they gave a bit of a council tax refund to their members. They gave the first in April. They said by November, they'll give another bigger one again in November. So that when the prices of energy, like electricity, gas, and coal for the house consumption, when the prices are going up, I think they have this to come in to ameliorate the shocks that will come their way. But the truth is that they can afford it.
You're talking about the government now.
Government, they can afford it. A government that cannot afford to give subsidy should not give subsidy.
And we are one of such now.
Yeah, because look at it. For April, as at the end of April, the money we spent on maintaining or servicing our debts is higher than the revenue for that quarter. That is totally unsustainable. And if we're not careful, that could be the projection to the end of the year.
So we'll be borrowing, how to service debt.
That's right. And a bulk of this debt is not taken away. It's not also, a part of it is also the issue of subsidy. Subsidizing as they come, as we pay, subsidize. Also, the people you owe locally, you owe overseas, you could to pay. For integrity, you have to pay them. But you're not able to pay them. But the truth again is that most of the revenue is not coming into government's hands. The revenue from oil is going to private hands through oil theft. And unluckily, government appears to be unable to do anything about it. We have sent out several papers to government on this from here, from the chamber, appealing to them of the need for them to address this issue of oil theft and save the economy of this nation. But the truth, if you don't subsidize, a lot of people will be in trouble. They couldn't be able to maintain any good level of living. And that's the argument of labor, that how will people survive? What people have done in many countries is to do some selected subsidy for certain sectors to support them in the area of agriculture, the area of energy, the area of aviation, and some other key areas of the economy. Support them. For instance, the issue of forex. If a lot of companies have access to forex at the official rate, it will be a lot easier. But how many of them have access to forex? Those are manufacturing.
It does appear as if the forex is not available, not just that they don't have access, it's not available officially.
That's right. Officially, yes, officially. And for those who have it outside, who want to sell it, look at the figure in between. So the point we are making clearly here is that government have to do their own homework on this issue of subsidy. If they cannot at a go take away the subsidy, let them do it gradually. It can be in phases, so as not to allow the shock, because it's now very huge. So the shock will not kill a lot of people. It can be done gradually. And also, you can give some selective subsidies, or grants or help to some very low-income people to support them. But the truth is that the people that enjoy the subsidy are the big people, like you.
Or you, sir.
Well, I don't know about me, like you, because the truth is that the common man doesn't have 4, 5, 6 cars. The common man does not live in a house of 10, 12, 20 air conditioners, or 4 or 5 fridges or refrigerators. It's the big people that are benefiting from these subsidies. Who can afford to pay it? That's my worry. And the same people are now happy for government to subsidize their own cost of living and their own quality of living. And the poor people are those that will suffer if government will remove the subsidy. That's the balance. But the truth there is that it's the big people that actually should help this country to salvage the economy of this country by making a sacrifice for the poor people. So let's pay what we should pay as the real cost of the fuel we are consuming. In our factories, in our homes, in our offices, on our roads. If you do that, government can now have money released to develop infrastructure, to spend money on education. Look at ASU. But on strike. Because government said they cannot afford to pay what they're asking for. People are saying, can government not really afford? But the truth is that government has no money. Because things are very, very tight. But if there are areas that we can release money like that, like this obsession, you cannot do it at a go, let them do it in phases. Then target some key areas of governance that require help. It got to a point, in time of COVID, England, America, they gave checks to their citizens to help them.
Yes, direct.
Yeah, direct to help them. Millions will receive checks by post. That's governance.
But as you said, we can't because the government isn't in a financial position to do it.
But the truth is that from what we are as a nation, we have more than enough to live on. All we need to do is to manage what we have much better than what we are doing now.
Just before this interview, I was reading that the governors, that's those at the sub-national level, had proposed that as part of the cost of shrinking the costs and governance, they wanted something that up until now was more prevalent in the private sector, which is they wanted those civil servants at federal and state level who were 50 already to go on voluntary retirement and free up the space, especially because they were people who were earning the most anyway. It's just a proposal, it's not been implemented, but already people are saying, look, this could create another problem. How sure are you that if you took that option, they would pay you your gratuities or they'd put you on the pensions? I mean, they're looking at those who are already on pensions now and they're seeing them constantly go through crisis and hell to be able to receive any kind of payment. But I use that only as a peg to describe where we are and to ask the question that at the level of the LCCI, your members, how have they coped this year with the economic headwinds as they have come? You've mentioned some of them, the foreign exchange, the inflation rate, the aftermath of COVID. We talked about the war in Ukraine. Even if we take just those, how have they managed to cope? Has it been complicated, or is it a situation where many have had to just simply say, look, I can't keep this up, I have to fold?
Well, let me tell you from what we know here, as it says, the oldest chamber in West Africa.
134 years old.
34 years old. And we are the second oldest in Africa, but the most vibrant chamber in the continent of Africa. We also have about 60% of the manufacturing sector here at the chamber, of the whole country, here in the chamber. So we have a feel of what is happening. A lot of people are passing through very, very hard times. A number of times here, our DG and some of us here have to do some intervention with government to help certain people, certain companies that are falling into problems. But the truth is that a number of times when we intervene, government, they've been doing their best so far. They do intervene to help. Some people, when they apply for loans, when they apply for grants, when they apply for some sort of grant, some of our special funds that are available in government, in central bank, that will help them to speak to central bank, will help them to also facilitate all of this from the banks. But the truth is that many of them are not coping very well. Many are not coping very well, especially those who are manufacturing, because they have real pressure about getting their raw materials. Usually, those of them, their raw materials are actually imported because of Forex. And that's why we are telling government, when the Monetary Policy Committee, when they met, and they raised from 13 to 40% the MPL. Then, of course, the attempt is to work on inflation.
Yes.
Which as Asiwaju was 30.6. But the truth is that that alone itself cannot solve the problem. Because a number of these companies, they are really suffering because of inflation. Costs are very, very high. Forex is not available for them. They don't have to look for other sources to get money.
To be able to pay for raw materials that are being brought
here. When they come in here, they don't have the light to work on. They have to use generators and buy diesel at 800, 850, whatever it is. One of them, they have no roads. They have to manage the roads that lead to their factories. Many of them, no security. They have to provide their own security. Many of them, no water. They have to do their own boreholes. I was on a corporate visit to a company in Solo about a month ago. They operate on generator 24/7. And they have their own boreholes that they use to avoid any interruption or the quality of the water that will come. These are things that they are coping with in a country that is as rich as Nigeria. And that's why a number of companies are closing down and moving to a smaller country that's not even up to the GDP of Lagos. That's Ghana, of Lagos State. Moving to Ghana. They find it more convenient there to do business there. A number of major companies have moved from here to Ghana because they find it more temperate to handle for them to do their businesses. You know.
And then, of course, power is more steady in Ghana.
That's right. But the truth is that we are the giant of Africa, and we have all it takes to keep that status. All we need is political will of our leaders to do all those things that will make us to get to where we want to be. This is a nation of over 200 million people, not 200 million people who are useless people, 200 of very vibrant, aggressive, and hardworking people. People who are making their ways all over the whole world. People who are creating good name for Nigeria globally and who don't want to stay in their own country. I'm saying no. The time must come, let's encourage our people to come back to Nigeria and build Nigeria. They cannot go to Nigeria unless the environment is there for them to come and do their own businesses or perform their own roles for the economy. So our companies are really having very, very tough times. But we tell them that we'll do our best to talk to government. We should do almost on a weekly basis. If I just released a press release today on dead body, we did a dead body event here about a month ago, for which we did a paper, get to government. What we now do from my regime is that all our submit to government, I package them, send them to different people in government at the federal and the state level. Because they can't pick everything through the newspapers. So let them see the whole context of all our arguments. And when we have all these engagements, all the summaries of all discussions, decisions, and recommendations, we put them together and send to government. And we want to thank God. The Office of the SGF replied some time ago that they acknowledge those things and they are working on them. So we are very hopeful that this government can still correct a lot of things between now and when they leave next year.
But security, which you referenced at some point, there will be those who will say, well, Lagos has not really borne the brunt of security, and therefore LCCI should not have problems in terms of security. It wouldn't be like the Abuja Chamber of Commerce or the Kaduna Chamber of Commerce or others who have been at the center of security concerns. Is that true? Has there been no cost to LCCI in terms of security?
To start with, people are looking at LCCI as a Lagos State Chamber of Commerce. We are not. We're not a city chamber. We're a national chamber of commerce. When the chamber was established in 1888, there was no Nigeria. Until 1914, we had the amalgamation. There was no Lagos State in 1888 when the chamber was established. So we're not a city chamber of commerce. We're a national chamber of commerce. So when we speak for Nigeria. You can see most of our engagements are not necessarily for Lagos State. Because they apply to Lagos State, but most of them are national. We look at SCCI, we look at things globally, look at it nationally. We look at the chamber, where we look at ourselves as a chamber, because we are the only chamber in West Africa as at 1888. Many came long after. We've been there before First Bank.
Yeah.
1896. So we've been there. So when we speak for the whole country. In fact, at times we speak for Africa. And the truth is that we should not wait until things get to any part of the country where we are located before we speak in national interest. We have sent papers to government on insecurity a couple of times because of our desire to have a Nigeria that is peaceful. Because whatever happens in Northwest, Northeast, would one day at a point affect Lagos. Not necessarily in terms of invasion, but whatever is happening there will affect us. Because a lot of people have to now move from those states into Lagos and put a lot of pressure on Lagos resources. I was just telling Lagos State people last week when they had the pre-Embeti summit that 30 years ago, I was Lagos State Finance Commissioner. Later, I was Commissioner for Works and Transport, about 29 years ago. This is not the Lagos of that time. Lagos has changed. Lagos has moved on. But now, Lagos are competing with a lot of more people. And they are forced to now cater for a lot of more people than what we'll expect. Because what is happening in all other parts of the country. So the earlier we try to address those issues, the better for Nigeria, the better for Lagos. Whereas Lagos will be having more than enough share of the burden of Nigeria. And I told them at that meeting that nothing must go wrong with Lagos, because Lagos is the heart of Nigeria. If the heart is in trouble, then the whole country the whole body is in trouble. So if Lagos economy is in trouble due to insecurity, then the whole country is as good as gone. And I pray that will be our portion as a nation. So we don't have to wait until they invade Lagos or start appealing to government to do all they need to do. I even got to a point I have to say, if it's becoming very obvious that we cannot handle this on our own, there's nothing wrong asking for help. It should get to that point. Because I had to say that at a point. Our boss had got so worried. I said, if we are not able to keep our country safe, we should not, out of pride, that, oh, how can Nigeria go and appeal to come and help them? And now see ourselves become a failed nation. Nigeria is too big to be a failed nation. If we are 12, 15 million people, okay. Over 200 million people, where do we go? Who will absorb us as a nation? Which country in Africa will take us? Which country in Europe will take us? What's the population of England? Even of Europe? We have over 200 million people here in Nigeria. So we must do everything to help government to see the reason why they must work on this issue of security. That is now creating a big problem. And we got to a point where I had to weep when I heard that they said they will abduct our president. I said, that is courage from them. To see they will take our number one citizen. And they have said it, and we have not seen any serious action that will go and fish at those people who are saying such things, more than what we have seen so far. So I want to say that at the Chamber of Commerce here, we are for the whole country. Our worry is for the whole country. Because if we don't speak, people will blame us. They say, we are around for 134 years. You have the pedigree, you have the age, you have the size, you have the connection. Speak to people in government to help. And therefore, I'm making this opportunity to appeal to government that if there's nothing that they can do to help the economy of this nation, they must do something about insecurity. Because without security, there can be no economy.
I must ask you about two things. Well, about two outside control things that tend to affect what's going on here. The first is, of course, as you mentioned, our neighbors in West Africa.
and the issue of trade. It got to a point where the president had to order the closure of the borders just in the run-up to COVID, when COVID arrived, in the expectation that that would help stem some of the problems of indiscriminate bringing of goods into the country to compete, the issue of tariffs and all of that. Is it a good deal, especially for Nigerian businesses, for us to have this continent free trade agreement?
The AFCTA, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, in my opinion, and in that of the Chamber, is a worthwhile development for Africa. But the only thing that Nigeria must be positioned properly to achieve the benefits of that agreement. Others will be the one that will suffer for it. Not all countries have signed the agreement in Africa. I think there are a couple of countries, maybe 5 or 6, that have not signed the agreement. But Nigeria, like you said, also delayed before they signed because Mr. President was being careful, which I agree with. But the truth there is that if we trade with ourselves in Africa, then we'll have a better chance to develop our continent. But Nigeria, being the biggest economy in Africa, must ensure that we are well positioned to take advantage of the benefits of the continental free trade agreement. Otherwise, our companies will lose out. In the sense that if our cost of operation here is quite higher compared to that of our neighbors, then there'll be issues. Because a lot of costs Nigerian businesses are having to carry, which will be part of their cost in the long run, which of course will determine their prices, might make us not very competitive. So these are the areas that we need to make sure that we look at. That's why we are very concerned about how much is available for capital development for the country. In the first quarter alone of this year, the bulk of the money, went for debt servicing. Just over 700 million naira went for capital. And I do hope that there will be funds. One thing is to have the budget. Another thing is for us to also have the money released when the time is due for the fund to be released for the capital, for the expenditure.
Yeah.
If you look at all this, you can see that there's a lot of pressure on Nigeria to remain competitive, even within Africa, even within the ECOWAS. What are the problems we had about AGOA? A number of our companies could just not cope. Then they talk about the issue of quality, the issue of packaging, a lot of other things. Then the issue again was cost. People now saw that it's even cheaper to buy things that are imported than things that are done here locally.
Because of that additional cost.
That's right, that they are there to carry, that other overseas countries won't have to worry about. They are taken as given. They are taken as given. No factory in Europe or America will go and employ some sophisticated people for security for their factory. They don't need it. Because the environment provide all this, or provide menstrual water, or look for light. They just hold on to what's given by government. Unless those who are in special industries, that they must have it on in Toronto for as long as life is. When they are doing some operation, they put on generator. There's some countries don't even care. They just, because the supply of light is taken for granted. And it's been there for decades, uninterrupted. I remember in England, when I was in England, if they would take light for 10 minutes, they will announce it. That they will be, I'm sorry, we do some maintenance, 10 minutes between the hours of 4 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., we're going to switch off just for about 20, 30 minutes. and exert that, they'll come back. You can then plan yourself. But those are in those days. I'm sure once they still do it once in a while, but it's a very rare thing. But here it's like a norm. So it's like it's normal we don't have light. Or you now, from government, we now have to fall back on your own generator. So I agree entirely. I believe in the African Continental Free Zone Agreement. I believe in it very well, the AFCT. I believe in it very well. Because we need to work together as Africans. Because it is not in our interest for Africans to be patronizing other countries and leave their brothers here in Africa. A lot of you can buy from Ghana. Why not buy from Ghana? Why do you have to go and buy it through other countries? That's what happens. A lot of products they have in Kenya, you now buy them from another country, overseas. Because the first set to those countries, you now buy from there, you now bring to Nigeria. Why can't we do it directly? And that way we do it, it will make Africa stronger. It also make us to develop the weak African countries, become stronger, because we can help them to mentor them. We can help them to develop them. We can also help them to even have some of our companies to go there to set up, manufacture in those countries, give them labor, supply labor give them labor in that country, give opportunity also to grow their economies, as against also relying entirely on foreign countries. So I agree entirely in that African agreement. It's just for us to ensure that Nigeria is well positioned so as to take full benefits of the arrangements.
At the LCC, I am sure there are people who would have reported to you. There is very well known that there is, as you pointed out, seemingly an absence of will to take on some vested interests in government, especially when it relates to corruption, inefficiencies, duplication of parastatals, things like that. But there are those who say that that has also crept into the private sector too. You have a significant corruption, attempts to cut corners on the declaration of taxes, attempts to smuggle in goods to undercut competitors, and all of that. As a chamber, which is a body of members, what are you doing? Is it true that you get reports like this? And if so, what are you doing about such reports?
Well, I wouldn't say that we have gotten sent to us in writing about such report, but we hear about it. Then we also know that whatever is happening around us is a function of the total environment that businesses do operate in this country. For us as a chamber, when they come in for the induction, we emphasize the issue of high ethical standard, of high ethical practice in business and our professions. What I'm trying to say in effect is that a number of our members here, if not all of us, we all try to make sure we do things properly. There are a number of times when they've had problems, they run to the chamber for help. And we speak to government. A number of times too, in customs, MPA, they've helped them. The master, they've helped them. Without necessarily asking for anything. So which means that if we as Nigerians, if we can all decide to have a clean nation, it's achievable. The leadership must set the pace. Because when the pace is set by leadership, followers will just follow.
Dr. Olawale Cole, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, my brother.
Thank you with you.
Thanks so
Thank you
much.
very much.
Thank you.
That's our program today. We would, of course, like to hear from you on the conversation. Our social media handles are right there on your screen. You can also listen to this and previous episodes of the program via our podcast. Please visit our website, channelstv.com/podcast to get started. I am Ladi Akeredoluale. Goodbye.